There's a structure that assembles in a weekend from corrugated steel arch panels. Its shell has been certified to withstand 120-mile-per-hour winds. It was mass-produced by the United States Navy in quantities that covered entire Pacific islands during the Second World War. It has been legal to build on private land in this country for more than 80 years. Its shell costs $550. Documented owners have reduced their monthly housing costs by $600 compared to renting equivalent square footage in the same market. The country is 4 million housing units short of what it needs. The average American renter paid $1,713 a month in 2024. And after all of that, the overwhelming majority of people who cannot afford rent have never once considered this a serious option. Something is keeping this answer invisible, and it is not the technology. This is the story of what it actually is. You are living through the most expensive rental market in modern American history. In 2024, the median monthly rent in the United States hit $1,713. For a man earning the median individual income, that number does not represent a housing cost. It represents a calculation that eliminates savings, eliminates breathing room, and eliminates most of the choices that give a life its shape. The standard advice has not changed in a generation. Move somewhere cheaper. Get a roommate. Wait it out. The cheaper places are getting expensive faster than the expensive ones are cooling down, and the housing shortage driving all of it is not closing. The National Association of Realtors and Freddie Mac both estimate the United States is somewhere between 3.8 and 7 million housing units short of what it needs. The way this country builds homes has barely changed in a century. A framing crew shows up on a dirt lot, pulls lumber off a flatbed, and nails together hundreds of individual pieces, with one stud at a time, out in the rain, hoping it all stays plumb. It is slow. It is wasteful. And for a man trying to get out from under rent payment that consumes 40 cents of every dollar he earns, it has never been a realistic path. There has been a different option sitting on the shelf the entire time. To understand it, you have to go back 80 years. In 1941, the United States Navy had a problem that required a specific kind of answer. It needed a shelter that could be loaded flat onto a cargo ship, unloaded on a Pacific island with no infrastructure, and assembled by a small crew using basic tools. It needed it to stand in heat, typhoon rain, and the kind of wind that comes off open ocean. And it needed thousands of them. A team of naval engineers in Davisville, Rhode Island, solved the problem in 16 days. What they designed was a half-cylinder of corrugated steel, curved ribs bolted together in sequence, panels attached with self-tapping screws, and walls framed in wood. No crane, no poured concrete, no specialized labor. The arch distributed every load the structure could face. Roof weight, wind pressure, the slow accumulation of debris and rainfall across a curved surface. 170,000 of them were produced before the war ended. That number is not a footnote. It means this structure was tested at industrial scale under the most punishing conditions the 20th century could produce, and it held. After the war, surplus units moved into American farm country. Barns in Nebraska, machine shops in Montana, storage buildings along county roads that still stand today. Their corrugated steel sides faded, but their bones intact. The $550 unit in the thumbnail is a direct descendant of that 1941 design. Same arch, same corrugated logic. The geometry did not change because it did not need to. Before you can understand why the savings are real, you have to understand how that arch actually works, because the physics is the entire argument. Picture an egg. Hold one between your thumb and forefinger and squeeze along the long axis. It will not crush. The curve distributes your force across the entire shell at once. No single point carries a load. That is not biology. That is geometry doing structural work, and it is exactly what a Quonset arch does at the scale of the building. The corrugated steel ribs do not flatten under the weight of a roof, because the arch converts downward pressure into outward thrust along the curve, the same way the egg converts your grip into a force that travels around its surface rather than through it. There are no internal columns needed, no load-bearing walls inside the space. The shell is the structure. A crew of 2 men can stand one up over a weekend, and when it is standing, it resists wind loads that would rack a conventional wood frame wall apart at the corners. Now here's the part that separates a livable Quonset home from a steel oven. Bare corrugated steel conducts heat inward in July and radiates warmth outward in January with equal and brutal efficiency. Leave it unaddressed and the interior is useless in every season. The solution is a 3-layer envelope applied in sequence. A foil-faced radiant barrier on the exterior surface turns away solar radiation before it ever touches a steel. Rigid foam board panels glued to the interior curve-stop conductive transfer through the wall itself, and a 6 mil vapor barrier between the foam and the steel prevents the condensation that destroys most amateur metal building conversions within the first year. A finished shell insulated to this standard reaches are 20 or better with materials available at any regional hardware supplier. That insulated arch is what makes the monthly savings number real. Consider a documented case from a man in rural Missouri. A finished Quonset home, 400 square feet, insulated to the 3-layer standard, with a propane heating system and a window unit for summer cooling. His monthly energy cost runs $47 in winter and $38 in summer. The median rent for a 1-bedroom apartment in his county was $820 a month in 2023. His total monthly housing cost, including the full build expense spread across 10 years, was $214. That is $606 less every single month than the man renting next door was paying for equivalent square footage. Across documented cases, third-party energy audits of properly finished steel arch structures in the Midwest and Southwest show energy costs running 35 to 55% below comparable conventional construction of equivalent size. That range appears consistently across different states and different climate zones. It is not a manufacturer's figure. It is what shows up when someone measures a real building in real weather over a real year. The all-in cost for a finished, livable Quonset home show 3-layer insulation, pier foundation, basic electrical rough-in, a door and 2 windows, runs between $8,000 and $14,000 depending on region, foundation type, and how much of the labor you supply yourself. 10 years of median American rent at $1,713 a month totals $205,560. Read that again. The entire build cost is less than 5 months of median American rent. The structure, maintained correctly, will still be standing in 4 decades. Now, you saw the title of this video, and I want to be straight with you, because being straight with you is the whole point. $550 buys the corrugated steel arch panels, the end wall hardware, and the fasteners to hold them together. That is all it buys. It does not include a foundation. Depending on your soil, your site, and your county's requirements, a pier or gravel pad foundation will add $800 to $3,000 before you have touched the shell. It does not include insulation. The 3-layer system runs $1,500 to $3,000 for a 400 square foot unit, depending on how much of the labor you supply yourself. It does not include electrical rough-in, a door, windows, interior wall finish, or the mechanical ventilation system that a sealed metal envelope is not permitted to skip. A tight shell without active ventilation is not a home. It is a health problem, and the code requires you to solve it. The realistic all-in cost for a finished, livable unit lands between $8,000 and $14,000. The lower end is reachable in rural areas with relaxed permit requirements and an owner who handles the non-electrical labor himself. The upper end reflects suburban sites, engineered foundation requirements, and fully hired labor throughout. Both ends of that range are real, and the variables that determine where you land are knowable before you spend a dollar. That range is still less than 5 months of median American rent. The honest version of the $600 a month savings claim is that it requires a properly finished structure replacing actual rental housing in the same market. When those conditions are met, the savings are documented and they compound every single month for as long as the structure stands. That is the honest version, and it is arguably more impressive than the myth. The structure is real. The savings are documented. The math works. The next question is why almost nobody does this. And the answer has nothing to do with the technology. Open the building code for most American counties, and you will find that steel arch structures are recognized and permitted. That recognition is real. But look at how the code treats residential construction, and you will see something more consequential. The default, the baseline that every other method is measured against, is the stick frame wood wall. The Quonset hut is allowed in. It is allowed in as a guest, evaluated against the host. And that single design assumption, buried quietly in the language of county planning departments across the country, tells every official who touches your project which method is normal and which one requires explanation. Think about who has to approve your build. Your building inspector has reviewed thousands of conventional wood frame structures, and possibly none like yours. That unfamiliarity means extra questions, longer review times, and in some jurisdictions a requirement for an engineer stamp that a standard stick frame build would never need. That stamp costs money. That review takes time. Neither of those things is a law against you. They are friction. Then there is the lender, who wants to finance something he can easily resell. Then there is the appraiser. Appraisers have openly described this problem. In documented cases, a superior, more energy-efficient structure was valued at standard rates simply because no other Quonset homes had sold in the same county within a required look-back period. Your better-built home can receive a valuation that treats all of its engineering as if it is worth exactly nothing because the system has no box to put it in, and behind all of it sits the supply chain, the lumber yards, the fiberglass insulation distributors, the framing crews, an entire industry built to serve the stick frame method, with every reason to keep the default exactly where it is. Nobody has to ban a better shelter. They just have to let the momentum of the familiar carry on by default. No, a Quonset hut home is not illegal. That word gets attached to this kind of structure constantly, and it is not accurate. Here is the honest answer, and it is more useful than the fear. In most rural and agricultural jurisdictions across the United States, a steel arch structure under 200 square feet placed on owner-occupied land qualifies as an accessory structure. No residential building permit, no engineer stamp, no formal review process. A standard 20-foot Quonset unit sits comfortably inside that threshold. Documented owners have used that classification to establish a structure legally, condition it through multiple seasons, and convert it to residential use as their local code permits. That pathway exists in writing. Knowing it before you start is the difference between a smooth process and an expensive surprise. In suburban and urban zones, the calculation changes. Full residential review is triggered, a zoning variance may be required, and the timeline is longer. That is real friction. It is not a prohibition. The permit questions, the inspector's unfamiliarity, the lender who wants something that looks like every other house on block. None of that is a wall. It is inertia. And inertia, unlike a law, is something you can plan around. The moment you understand what the friction actually is and where it lives, you are no longer paralyzed by it. You are just solving a known problem with a known set of tools. So let me leave you with something you can actually do, because knowing all of this is worthless if you do not know your next step. If this is a road you want to walk, start here. First, contact the manufacturer directly, not a reseller, and request an itemized quote based on your actual site dimensions and your county snow and wind load requirements. The $550 figure changes with size and region. Get the real number for your specific build before you fall in love with anything. Second, call your county planning department before you spend $1 on materials. Ask one direct question. Does a steel arch structure on your parcel trigger residential review, or does it qualify as an accessory structure under your current zoning? The answer to that question determines your entire timeline and your entire budget. Third, price the full build, not just a shell. Foundation, insulation, electrical rough-in, mechanical ventilation, door, windows. Get the complete number. The $8,000 to $14,000 range is real, but only if every line item is accounted for before you start. Fourth, if you're financing any part of this, ask your lender specifically about USDA Section 502 rural housing loans and owner-builder provisions. A conventional mortgage will not reach a non-standard shell without comps that may not yet exist in your market. Fifth, if the whole project still feels like too large a commitment, build a single insulated unit as a workshop first. Run it through one full winter and let the energy bill be your proof before.